Sometimes a woman thinks she has a man because he is there, because he answers, because he smiles, because he whispers the right words at the right moment. But presence is the greatest illusion in love. What matters is not the body you can touch, but the soul that never leaves. A man can sit beside you every day and still be miles away in spirit. Yet another man can vanish for months, and some quiet part of him keeps returning to you as if drawn by an invisible tide. The deepest form of possession is the one you cannot see, the one that happens beneath thought, beneath logic, beneath the fragile masks both genders wear to feel safe. And this is where the true story of psychological love begins. Carl Jung wrote that the strongest bonds do not form in daylight, but in the hidden architecture of the unconscious. That's why some loves die, even while two people sleep under the same roof, and others survive silence, distance, or endings that never truly end. To have a man is not to hold his hand. It is to live in the quiet chambers of his memory, to breathe in the corners of his mind long after he believes he has moved on. It is to echo in him. And an echo, once created, is almost impossible to silence. A man becomes emotionally attached not when he sees you, but when something inside him recognizes you. When you are no longer just a person, but a symbol of peace, of mystery, of something he wants to understand, but cannot put into words. When your presence both steadies and unsettles him. That paradox is where attachment takes root. And the astonishing truth is this: you do not awaken that reaction by trying. In fact, when you chase validation, you dampen the very energy he is unconsciously searching for. But when a woman stops performing, stops pleasing, stops shrinking herself into what she thinks she should be, her entire frequency shifts. She becomes heavier in spirit, yet lighter in energy, grounded, yet magnetic. She becomes real, and the male unconscious is starved for what is real. At that moment, he no longer sees a woman who demands attention or reassurance. He sees a presence, calm, unforced, unmistakably herself. He sees the mirror of his own soul, the part he has ignored, suppressed, or forgotten. This is what Jung describes so beautifully. Love is not born between two personalities, but between two unconscious minds that recognize each other long before the conscious mind catches up. A woman who reaches this level of resonance becomes unforgettable. Not because of beauty or charm, but because she touches the ancient part of a man that knows truth when it feels it. And this is where his quiet unraveling begins. He may not admit it, but something shifts. Confusion creeps in. Desire entangles with fear. His logic wrestles with impulses he did not choose. But it is already too late, because attachment, once awakened, does not ask for permission. It roots itself in him. He thinks of you when he shouldn't. He remembers details he never meant to store. He hears your voice in moments of doubt. Your energy slips into his life like a subtle fragrance he cannot identify but keeps searching for. This is psychological love, the kind that moves beneath every defense he has. And it isn't something he can control, no matter how hard he tries. A man doesn't fall in love when he's ready. He falls when a part of him surrenders, silently, involuntarily, entirely. Jung called this the awakening of the anima, the feminine presence within every man. When a woman embodies or reflects this inner archetype, even without intending to, something ancient in him stirs. It is a recognition older than memory, deeper than logic, and stronger than resistance. Suddenly, he finds himself drawn not to what she does, but to who she becomes inside him. This moment isn't loud. It doesn't look like fireworks. It usually feels like confusion. He approaches her when he shouldn't. He thinks of her without reason. He feels a pull toward her, even when his mind insists on retreat. He reads too much into her silences, yet feels comforted by them. It is the unconscious signaling that it has chosen, before he has consciously agreed. His eyes change first, his tone softens, his body reacts, those small betrayals of the nervous system no man can fake, and whether he admits it or denies it, something in him has already crossed the threshold. This surrender is not weakness. It is transformation. After encountering a woman who reflects his deepest self, he can never again settle for the shallow or the simple. Not because he becomes picky, but because he has seen a part of himself he didn't know existed until she illuminated it. Once that happens, every connection after her feels thinner, less true, less alive. A man does not surrender to the woman who conquers him. He surrenders to the woman who mirrors him. And when that mirroring happens, quietly, naturally, without strategies or force, the bond that forms is one he cannot rationalize away. His unconscious has spoken. And the unconscious, unlike the mind, cannot lie. But if the awakening of his anima is the beginning, then what truly binds him is what happens after. When the first spark turns into a quiet fire, he cannot escape. Many people assume a man bonds because of desire, because a woman gives him attention, because she makes him feel admired or important. But those are surface currents. They create excitement, not depth. The unconscious does not fall for intensity. It falls for authenticity. And a woman who stands rooted in herself radiates a coherence the male psyche instinctively recognizes as emotional safety, something he rarely encounters in the world around him. When her presence becomes a place where his nervous system can rest, something extraordinary happens. His emotional body begins to associate her with calm, with home, with a strange sense of being understood, without performing. It is not her beauty that imprints itself on him, but how he feels when he is near her. And the difference between fleeting attraction and deep emotional attachment is precisely this. In her presence, he becomes more himself. He feels seen, not evaluated, felt, not measured. Her silence does not threaten him. Her independence does not challenge him. Instead, it invites him. This is when the unconscious begins to weave her into his inner world. He notices the smallest shifts in her tone. He senses her distance before she voices it. He remembers the casual things she says, without intending to. And even when life pulls him into distractions, work, responsibilities, other people, something keeps tugging him back. He begins to seek her for reasons he cannot articulate, as if every path he takes loops back to the same emotional center, her. This is not magic. It is the mind's symbolic language. Her energy has entered his emotional field, and his psyche does what the unconscious always does with symbols. It protects them, revisits them, dreams through them. Yet here lies a paradox few women understand. When she tries to secure that connection, by giving more, sacrificing more, loving harder, she unknowingly dulls the very energy he fell for. The unconscious does not bond with excess. It bonds with balance. Overgiving turns the relationship into an emotional equation instead of a resonance. A woman who gives too much becomes an emotional placeholder, not a mystery. And mystery is essential, not for manipulation, but because the male unconscious awakens in the presence of something it cannot fully solve. This is why detachment, when rooted in genuine self-love, becomes so powerful. Not the cold kind that punishes, but the serene kind that says, I am here, but I am whole without you. When her energy shifts from needing him to simply choosing him, the polarity reverses. Jung said, the human soul moves in cycles of tension. What moves too close loses its magnetism, and what steps back begins to draw everything toward it. A man does not chase a woman because she is unavailable. He chases her because her self-possession creates emotional gravity. When she stops gripping, he begins to feel. When she stops proving, he begins to see. When she stops fearing his loss, he begins to fear losing her. This is not a strategy. It is energetic truth. When a woman clings, his unconscious activates its opposite pole, withdrawal. But when she withdraws softly, without resentment, without dramatizing the distance, she creates a void his psyche instinctively tries to fill. Suddenly he wonders why she is quiet, why she doesn't reach out, why her world no longer orbits his. These questions are not logical. They are primal. They awaken the same instinct that once helped men hunt, pursue, conquer. But here, it is not directed outward. It is directed toward an emotional connection he can no longer take for granted. And in that silence, he feels her more intensely than he ever did in her presence. Her absence becomes louder than her words. He replays things she said. He senses her slipping away. And deep inside, the unconscious whispers the ancient truth every man knows but rarely admits, that what is calm, rare, and self-contained is also what is most easily lost. So he seeks her, not out of duty, not out of fear, but out of a longing that surprises him. This detachment is not emotional distance. It is emotional elegance. A woman who is whole within herself carries a frequency the male psyche cannot ignore. It triggers admiration, attraction, and a subtle desire to rise to meet her. When she stops trying to possess him, she becomes unforgettable. And when she stops trying to be everything to him, he begins to feel she is the one thing he cannot replace. This shift creates a new dynamic, one in which he no longer sees her as an option, but as a presence that shapes the atmosphere of his life. A presence he fears losing more than he fears commitment. And the signs begin to reveal themselves in ways he cannot hide. Contradiction becomes his first confession. He tells her he's not ready, but he keeps coming back. He insists he wants freedom, yet he watches her pull away with panic, disguised as indifference. He claims he doesn't want a relationship, but his emotions betray a man already in one. Then comes involuntary attention. He remembers her preferences, her jokes, her moods, the micro-expressions she thought no one noticed. She becomes a reference point in his mind, the voice that echoes when he needs clarity, the softness he thinks of when the world overwhelms him. He seeks connection without purpose. A good morning. A random question. An unnecessary message at 1 a.m. These are not habits, they are instincts. And vulnerability appears quietly, awkwardly, sometimes wrapped in frustration because he does not understand why this one woman disarms him more than anyone else ever has. But his ego cannot protect him in her presence. And the more he tries to resist, the more his inner world betrays him. Finally, the gaze shifts, the unmistakable sign every woman recognizes, not desire, recognition, as if he is looking at something that feels like his past, his present, and his future all at once. It is in that gaze that the unconscious speaks the truth his words have not yet learned to form. You are already inside me. But having a man emotionally is not the end of the story, because what truly matters is whether the connection can survive the very intensity that created it. Many women think that once he is attached, the safest choice is to hold tighter, to secure the bond before it slips away. Yet this is the moment where most connections quietly break. Not because he stops feeling, but because the unconscious bond cannot breathe under the pressure of fear. Jung taught that true love exists in the delicate balance between two inner worlds, the I and the you. When one dissolves into the other, love does not deepen, it collapses into dependence. The paradox is this: once you already live in his emotional landscape, your greatest power is not in holding him, but in refusing to lose yourself. A man stays emotionally bonded, not to the woman who clings once he gives her a piece of his soul, but to the woman who remains whole even while he is attached, the woman who can love deeply without surrendering her essence. When he realizes that your world does not shrink to fit inside his, something awakens in him, a desire to rise, not to retreat. He does not fear your attachment. He fears the possibility of losing a woman whose presence elevates him. That is why your space, your purpose, your inner fire matter more after you have him than before. When you continue to cultivate your passions, keep your routines, nourish your mind and spirit, he feels something rare. A woman who loves him without needing him as a source of identity. And that is the kind of woman the male unconscious does not forget. The next key is emotional maturity. When he pulls back, not out of disinterest but out of instinct, you do not chase, demand clarity, or collapse into insecurity. You hold your center. You give him the space his psyche needs to process the depth he feels. This silence from you is not emptiness. It is respect. And it tells him something his unconscious rarely hears. I trust you to return. This trust becomes a mirror in which he sees his own emotional maturity, or lack of it. It invites him to grow without forcing him. A woman who understands this does not become his refuge from himself, nor his savior. She becomes something far more powerful, the mirror of who he can be at his highest. You reflect his greatness, not his wounds, his future, not his fear. And because of this, he associates you with growth, with expansion, with the version of himself he secretly hopes to become. This bond reaches its deepest form when a woman maintains her feminine energy without losing her emotional equilibrium. Gentleness rooted in strength, intuition grounded in clarity, softness that does not self-abandon. She listens not to please, but to understand. She loves not to be chosen, but to express what flows naturally from her soul. Her presence becomes a sanctuary, not because she shelters him, but because she does not require him to perform. Jung once said that a man meets his destiny on the path he takes to avoid it. And often, the woman who awakens a man's soul is the same woman he tries to rationalize away. But the unconscious does not move according to logic or fear. It moves according to resonance. If his soul has chosen you, he will circle back no matter how far he tries to wander. Not because you chase him, but because your authenticity creates an inner gravity he cannot outrun. A connection born in the unconscious must eventually rise into consciousness to become something lasting. What begins as projection, longing, or fascination must evolve into a deliberate choice. Two souls meeting in awareness rather than accident. This is where true love lives, a place where neither person loses themselves, yet both become more through the presence of the other. And here is the truth many people never learn. You do not need to prove you deserve love. You only need to stand in the truth of who you are. When a man is emotionally bound to a woman rooted in her own essence, love stops being a battlefield and becomes a slow unfolding, an awakening. He looks at her differently. He moves differently. He speaks differently. Even his silence changes texture. The unconscious never lies. It reveals. in the way he protects your peace, in the way he softens around your presence, in the way he fears hurting you, even when he isn't ready to name what he feels. His soul chooses long before his mind admits it, and you feel it. Not in his words, but in his energy. True love, the kind Jung would call destiny, is not born from need. It is born from two souls that vibrate close enough to recognize each other. It does not bind, it frees. It does not demand, it reveals. It does not consume, it transforms. It is the love that invites both people to rise, not shrink, to become more, not less. And when you allow love to unfold from that place of inner calm, you become a mirror in which he can finally see himself, without armor, without ego, without fear. That is the moment when love stops being a story of two people and becomes a journey of two unconscious minds, moving toward awareness together. And so if you're listening to this, perhaps the question is no longer, how do I make him love me? The real question is, how deeply am I willing to love myself so that the right soul can recognize me? Because when you stand in your truth, radiant in your essence, unafraid of silence, unafraid of losing what is not aligned, you become unforgettable, not just to him, but to the universe itself. And the love meant for you cannot help but return. If this message resonates with you, allow it to settle. Let it shift something inside you. And when you're ready for more insights like this, more truths that echo long after the video ends, stay close to HeartSync X. Your journey into deeper love, deeper self-understanding, and deeper awakening has only just begun.